What's up, Salt Lake City? How's it going? Right. That is very quiet. I'm going to plug this in. All right, let's practice what Tejas just taught everyone. It is so nice to be back here for this This is my second React rally. I was here last year as just an attendee, so I was very excited that I get to be back here as a speaker because I just love the mountains. I just love living in the mountains. Who else loves the mountains? Come on, give it up for the mountains for a little bit. And yeah, big shout out to the organizers, the crew, who put in so much hard work in hosting such amazing community events. Let's give a round of applause to the organizers, to the crew. And the MC is all right too, I guess. But yeah, jokes aside, I love Tejas, fantastic person. And like he mentioned, he gave a talk last year here at React Rally, not here at the same venue. But he gave a talk called Why Everyone Should Use a Framework. And it was a pretty relevant, pretty topical topic, I guess. And it's something I heavily agree with. Yeah, we all should use a framework. We all should use some structure and opinions before we just jump into building applications. So why am I up here talking about how you can build your own framework? Good question. Before that, hi, I'm Dev, and I'm a dev. The irony of that name is not lost on me, I promise. I've been building full-stack JavaScript applications for about 7 years now, and these are some of the 4 of the many projects that I've worked on, but these are the projects that I've worked on quite heavily that I derive a lot of my own experience from, and they have shaped a lot of my trajectory and my career into web development, into JavaScript, into front end, into full stack. And I'm also a content creator. If you like my talk today, you might also like some of my videos on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter. I mostly just shitpost there now, but sometimes I have valuable things to say as well. Got it. I see you there. The light is making it hard for me to see you, but I see you. That's kind of the end of my slides. So what's next? Yeah, let's get back to frameworks for a second. We have been spoiled by frameworks over the last few years. There was a time where there was one single framework that we used for React, which was create React app or React scripts. That was the way, that was the blessed way to build React apps, of having everything set up and just focusing on building our apps. But then we got Next.js, we got Gatsby, we got Remix, we got Redwood, we got Expo. I'm sure there's a bunch that I'm missing. We got Astro as well. We got Vaku. And there's a madman sitting somewhere in the room who's building yet another framework called Tamstack Start. So there's no shortage of frameworks for us. And in this world, why would we ever want to build a new one? Or why would we ever even consider it? Well, the point of today's talk, let me bring this a little closer. The point of today's talk is not necessarily that here's how you build your own framework, but it's more about what are the boundaries of these different frameworks? What do these different frameworks offer us that other frameworks don't? And how do we make decisions between when we should pick what framework and maybe when we should even build our own? Building our own framework is another thing that was very complicated 3 years ago, 4 years ago, but it has gotten so much simpler over the last couple or so years, or maybe even more, thanks to some amazing framework-agnostic tooling like Vite and Nitro. And that's what I'm going to be showcasing today, to build my own framework, to build our own framework, and then explore some of the boundaries of what these frameworks can do. So let's start off with an empty NPM project here. Yeah, I'm done with slides, and the rest of today is just going to be a bunch of live coding. All right, so I have an empty NPM project here. I'm going to install something called Vinci. Vinci is, I'm going to quickly open up the website for it. Vinci, okay. So Vinci is a pretty thin layer. I actually don't know how thin it is, but it's a layer on top of Vite and Nitro that offers abstraction that makes it pretty easy to build frameworks on your own. Frameworks like Next.js, a Remix, a SvelteKit, a SolidStart. Obviously, you're probably not going to build something as full-featured as Next.js in a short amount of time, but you can get pretty close. So that's what I'm going to be using today. Let's start with the simplest possible framework, which is an HTML file right here. I have a sample, just some boilerplate here. And I'm going to add a config file, app.config.ts. This is what we use to configure Vinci, the tool that we are using. So what we need to do first is export default, create app from Vinci. And the main thing that we need to learn about Vinci, yes, I am using Amazon Q. Don't boo me, please. So the core abstraction that Vinci provides us that helps us build frameworks, or maybe even helps us understand frameworks better, are routers. A Vinci router is kind of a special construct where there's different types of routers. We can see there's a client, HTTP, single page app, and static. We're going to go with a single page app router because that's probably what we are building with JavaScript. We're going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it client. And we're going to give it a handler, which is this index.html file that I've just created here. I'm going to save it. The HTML file, nothing fancy going on here. I don't even have these two things, but we're just going to see how it goes. I'm going to run npx vinci dev to start up the dev server. It's going to take a couple seconds, and it's going to give me localhost 3000, and here's our HTML app. So there we go. Thank you. So now we have like the most basic web framework that you can think of. It's an HTML file, and you can obviously write JavaScript or TypeScript files that go into it, or CSS files. There's nothing else here. The only opinion that this framework right now ships with is that we're using Vite for bundling. Vinci under the hood uses Vite, so this is basically a Vite setup. And I can show this by creating a JavaScript file. I'm going to call it client.ts. I'm going to put a console log here. Hello, Salt Lake City. And I'm going to go to my HTML file, add a script tag here, give it type module, and src. And I'm literally just going to point it to our TypeScript file, because Vite is smart enough to know that if you point something to a TypeScript file, it needs to do all the compilation itself. So we go back here, we open up the console, and we didn't even need to refresh because Vite is just really, really good. And if you're not using Vite, you're probably using Next.js. OK, so this is our basic framework. We have HTML, we have JavaScript, we have TypeScript. And the only opinion so far is that we're using Vite. So the boundary for this framework is really small. It tells you what bundler you're using, but nothing else. Everything else is up to us. And that's kind of one of the core points of web frameworks, which is the boundary between the opinions of the framework and the opinions that you are supposed to bring to complete the story, to make it suit your use case, whatever you want to do with it. This admittedly is not a very useful framework because it doesn't have anything else. It's just TypeScript, and everything else is up to us. So let's make it slightly more useful, and let's add in the least controversial opinion for today, which is React. We're going to install a few things here. Types React, because for some reason types don't ship within the React package. So we're going to install all the React stuff here. And because we are using Vite, we're going to install the Vite plugin for React. I think it's React plugin. I might have misspelled that. Oh, no, apparently not. So now I'm going to go to my app config, and we're going to talk about the router again for a second. One of the more interesting properties of a Vinci router is that they all have a plugin system or a plugin pipeline, a build pipeline. Usually in a Vite application, you have a single build, a single pipeline of plugins that your entire application goes through. But with Vinci, each of your router gets a separate independent build pipeline. So I'm going to import React Refresh from Vite plugin React. And I'm going to tell Vinci that I want to use this plugin for this router. And each router has, like I said, an independent pipeline. Well, right now I only have one, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to hop over to my client.ts file. I'm going to say create root. Oops. Create root. I'm going to give it document.getElementById. Thank you very much, types my autocomplete. I also need to rename this to TSX. This is complaining because I probably need to restart TypeScript. There we go. And now I need to go back to my HTML and create this div. So I'm going to come here. We're going to create a div like this. This is so old school. Like, who does this anymore? But yeah, we're building our own framework, so there we go. We also need to change this to TSX. Another superpower of Vite is that you can literally just point to a TSX file and it all works. It's kind of surreal. All right, let's see how this goes. We're going to run our dev server again. We're going to go back here, refresh, and it takes a little while. And we have this coming from a React app. We can also change this to hello from React, save, go back, and we have hot module reload. Because we have Vite and we have the entire plugin ecosystem that Vite brings with it. And now that we have React, we also have the entire ecosystem of React. So our framework now ships with two opinions. We're using Vite, we're using React. And this is the new boundary of this framework. And it's a little more useful now. It's more equivalent. Now it's very equivalent to a Vite React template that we might run into the wild. I'm going to remove some clutter from here, like that. And you can build some simple applications with this. But obviously, this is not enough. We want some more advanced capabilities in our framework. So let's create a new file, and we're going to. I have some snippets for this. I believe it's, and I forgot what these are. OK, anyways, let's say that now we want some routing. So I want to bring in a router to our application now. I'm going to use Router, which is a very minimal router. But now that we are thinking of routing, this is one of the more important decisions that we need to make, because routers are extremely important to modern applications. They bring in some fancy capabilities like hybrid routing, nested layouts, nested routing, data fetching and mutation, some sort of caching or invalidation mechanism, and so much more that we need to build good applications. But a lot of times with frameworks, we are logged into a specific router, and we cannot really move off from it, which is why every router author ends up being a framework author as well. But for now, I'm going to use a very minimal one to get the point across. And I'm just going to export default function app here. Oops. Let me quickly see what my snippets look like. I forgot what I called them. Oh, there we go. React SPA. I cannot type today. Not that one. Come on. Damn, how did I already forget what my snippets are? I'm sorry, this is way too early in the morning for me. OK, there we go. OK, so now we have an application with some links. We have 3 routes here. And we have the /app route where we have a counter, just so that we have some state. And we have a little to-do list that renders an array here. So let's save this. Let's hop back into our client. Let's get rid of this and just render our app here. OK. Do we have it running? We don't. npx Vinci dev. And now head back here. Let's give it a refresh. And now we have our app with some routing. So we can go between the pages. We have our app here. We have state. And we have our rendering. So now our framework also ships with a router. We can now build more complicated applications, slightly more complicated applications. There's one final piece missing here for a single page app, which is code splitting. You really don't want to build too big of an application with this simple setup. You always want some sort of code splitting and lazy loading. And one of the things about lazy loading is that it's kind of a pain to set up manually, because now you have separate entry points for each route in your application. And lazy loading is a pretty big reason why frameworks went towards file system routing in the first place. The good thing is, Vinci makes it pretty easy to add file system routing as well. So let's do some file system routing so that we can do lazy loading and we can round up our single page app framework here. So I'm going to bring in a file system router, like so. And I'm going to explain what this does in a quick second. All right, so this is a pretty straightforward way to add file system routing into a Vinci project. A file system router is just a class that extends this base file system router. So let's say that we have a pages directory, and inside we have an index.ts and an app.ts. And we want, actually, both of these need to be tsx. And we want both of these to be independent routes in our application. Here I'm just going to say export default function index, return. Sure. Well, we don't have Tailwind, but wow, this really thinks we're a Next.js application. React application. Let's go with that. OK. And for our app, we are just going to bring in these two things, for our counter and our to-dos. So export default function app and return with a fragment. And I just need to copy these two from here to here. OK. So how can we get file system routing working now? For this, we hop back to our configuration. And all we have to do is implement these two methods for now. What these two methods do is take the path to the file as an input. So this src is going to be the full path to both of these files here, the app and the index. What we're going to do is clean up all the file system stuff from it so that all we are left with is a /app and /index. We're going to remove the trailing slash from it. And we're going to replace index with an empty string because we want the index.ts or index.whatever to be the root or to be the / route. And then we're just going to return it. Right now, we don't have any sort of dynamic routing. All we have is we take whatever this path is, whatever this name is, and convert it to a route. And in this function, we are creating an object that we are going to be using in a little bit. But this is a function that we have available at runtime so that we can do our stuff. Again, it'll make more sense in a little bit. And to use it, we can come down here, and we can say our routes, and it's another thing that I have a snippet for. There we go. All right. So this is how we use a file system router in any Vinci router, which is to give it the directory. So we want to go to the src pages folder, which we just created. We are looking for these files with these extensions, and then just pass in some configuration that Vinci gives us. But this is mostly it for the configuration. Thank you. All right, file system routing, we're almost there. Now, the final thing we need to do is hop back into our app. Right now, it should still work as expected. So if I go here, if I refresh, everything still works because we haven't changed our application code at all. So we're still using all of these routes. We're not code splitting anything. To do that, let's come here and we first need to wrap it in a router. So there we go. Oops. Need to remove that. And this is OK. So we're now using the router provider from Wouter, which is optional. Usually, if you're using something like React Router, a top-level provider like this would be mandatory. But with Wouter, it's optional. Now we need it because we need to give it a custom way to match routes. because we're not defining these ourselves. These are coming from the file system. We're going to import path from regex. Import. OK, perfect. Thank you. Sometimes you're useful, I believe. OK. But how do we get access to the file routes? To do that, we have an import here from Vinci called Vinci/routes. Yeah. This is going to give us all the file routes that we have exported from our configuration. So let's see what this looks like. File routes, and we're going to check it out in the console. And for now, I'm going to comment this out. Let's hop back here, and let's look at this array. So we have, if I can zoom in, we have the component here, we have the file path, and we have the app. So this is the object that we returned from the second method of our configuration here. This one, which we can now use at runtime to actually configure a router with all the file system routes that we have here. And the file system configuration is completely separate from the runtime configuration. So you can build whatever conventions here that you want, and you can use whatever routing library here that you want. Those two things are independent of each other, which is a really cool feature of Vinci. And if you are building your own framework, it's very convenient because you're not logged into any specific file system configuration. You're not logged into any specific router. And you can copy the file system convention of Remix or the one of Next.js or build something like SvelteKit, and it's completely up to you. And it doesn't matter what routing library you use at runtime. So let's take this and let's bring this back. I have a snippet here, I think. Yeah. So now we are going to take the file routes, and we're going to do some additional things. We also need to install a pretty lightweight wrapper on top of like some React features. So I'm going to install Vinci/React. This is a little helper library that the author of Vinci has made to make it easier to work with React and lazy loading. So this is going to give us lazy route, which just uses react.lazy under the hood. And the second thing that we have here is get manifest. So every time we have a build from Vinci, Vinci is going to build and bundle our application using Vite, and it's going to output a bunch of information about all of our different bundles. A manifest is a way for us to request that information out of Vinci. So here, we're going to map over all of our file routes. We're going to use the dollar component, which, again, we returned from here. And just quickly about this default, this is telling Vinci that out of all these files in the pages folder, we want the default export. So if you remember, we are exporting the default function, which we want to be the route component. So back here, we tell Vinci that we want the default export of these files as dollar component. And then coming back here, we are using lazy route to create a lazily loaded React component, the same thing that you do with react.lazy. And finally, we can come here and map over our routes, routes.map, route, and we can say route path is route.path, and component is route.component. Let me get rid of that. And we can get rid of these routes now, and we can get rid of these components because now they're going to be lazily loaded. And lazy loading also means we might need to wrap this in suspense. We are not going to have a fallback yet, but suspense is a pretty useful thing. How many of you are using suspense in production? Awesome. Keep doing that. React 19 is not going to change anything about that, I promise. I know, I don't actually. OK, so now let's see if we actually have file system routing. Let's hop back here. Oh, I don't have it running. px Vinci dev. And give it a second. Log file has changed. I agree. Let's going to refresh it now. It's going to take a second. And here we have our app, the welcome. So this is our new welcome app that we built. We can go back to route, and we still have all of this working. Another thing that you might have noticed, if we refresh, and if we click back on home, there's a white flicker because now we can see that it's lazily loading this component instead of just it being always there, which is why we're seeing the white flash because we don't have a suspense fallback. But there we go. We now have a single page app with routing, with route-based code splitting, with file system routing, and with a lot of these fancy capabilities that we look from frameworks. I can go on and on. We can very easily add API routing to it, or API handlers for backend stuff. We can add server-side rendering. There are two production frameworks that are being built on top of Vinci right now, including TanStack Start, which is likely going to be my framework of choice for a long time. But the point of this was that these are the different boundaries that a lot of the frameworks that we can choose have between them. They tell you how to do bundling. They tell you how to do routing. They tell you how to do your file system structure. And they might also tell you how to do your backend and server-side rendering. And if you don't agree with some of their opinions, now you can build your own. And I am sorry that I didn't have enough time to show you all of these things, but I would love to do that. If you are still interested in that, hop on to my YouTube channel or something, or just hit me up on Twitter. There's a bunch of resources out there on how you can use this to build your own framework. Thank you very much, and please don't shoot yourself in the foot building a framework that others have to then maintain after you.